Hello everyone, Zen BBQ 2.0 is here and it's our biggest update yet. The highlight is a completely new map baking system that turns procedural bevels into production-ready textures, making the workflow faster, easier and more reliable. Let's take a look at what's new. For people who are not familiar with Zen BBQ, I'll begin with an overview of its core features. After that we will move on to the new functionality. Once the add-on is installed, I recommend clicking Enable GPU and selecting your graphic card as a rendering device. Zen BBQ relies on cycles for its procedural bevel previews and baking, so GPU acceleration can significantly improve performance. Before we can assign bevel presets or switch between viewport display modes, we need to select an object. With the object selected, choose a suitable bevel size from the preset list. Each preset has its own radius value and unit of measurement, both of which can be changed at any time. Once the desired value is set, click Assign. To see procedural bevels, switch the viewport display mode to shader. If your scene does not have any lighting, turn off scene world option using this button. We can now see that 3 cm bevel has been assigned to the entire object. To improve the quality of the preview, we can switch the shader render preset to high. Under preset properties, you can adjust individual cycles viewport rendering parameters. These settings are synchronized with Blender's native viewport sampling settings, so you can customize them and save the result as your own render preset. Now let's switch to edit mode and enable highlight bevel overlay. This displays the assigned bevel values directly on the mesh using their preset colors. Our 3 cm bevel is shown in blue. Pressing Ctrl plus Shift plus X opens Zen BBQ Pie menu, which gives us quick access to the first 6 bevel values from the active preset group. Let's select a few mesh elements and assign a 1 cm bevel using Pie menu. Then we will select another section and assign a 2 cm bevel. The different bevel values are clearly identified by their overlay colors, while shader preview lets us see the actual difference in bevel width on the model. For every value in the preset list, we can use Select by Selected preset to select all geometry with that particular bevel radius. We can also select a mesh element and use Smart Select to find other edges or vertices with the same bevel value as current selection. The existing values can be edited and additional values can be added to the list. The numbers from 1 to 6 indicate which presets are currently available in the Pie menu. For example, if we move the 12 cm value higher in the list and place it in the 6th position, it will immediately appear in the Pie menu. Now let's save the entire list as a new preset group by clicking the plus button. The preset has been saved. If we open the preset drop-down, we can see all available preset groups and quickly switch between them. Finally, bevel values can be assigned not only to selected edges but also to individual vertices. This makes it possible to create variable width bevels and more interesting transitions, for example, these smooth changes around the corners. If you want to remove bevels from the object, please use Reset button in the right corner. It works for selected elements in Edit mode and for the whole object in Object mode. Also, don't forget about the live boolean settings. From the drop-down menu you can define the default bevel radius for the selected object. Zen BBQ automatically applies this value to the new edges generated by boolean modifiers and you can adjust it at any time. For each display mode you can choose how the object is displayed in the viewport. For example, I'll set solid to wireframe. Now when I switch to shader mode, I can see Zen BBQ override node appear in the shader editor. It is inserted directly before the material output without overwriting the existing material setup or changing the user's shaders. If necessary, you can unlock the shading settings and choose a different mode for shader. You can also customize color used for the shader override preview. Just below the display mode controls you can choose which procedural map to preview. Right now we are displaying the normal map. But we can switch to ambient occlusion, curvature, convexity, concavity, bevels masks, parts ID, materials ID, or object space normal map. If the override node has been modified or the preview stops working correctly, you can restore it using Repair Preview Nodes button. This regenerates all Zen BBQ previews node, so keep in mind that any manual changes made inside them will be removed. Now it's time to take a look at the image display mode. When we switch to image, the object displays a checker pattern because a baked normal map does not exist yet. Let's create one with a selected object. Open the Bake tab and use the Pin button in the upper right corner to keep the panel visible while working. The target mode is currently set to selected, so we can simply click Start. The normal map is baked for the selected object in just a few moments. To get back selection tracking, click Resume Monitoring. If we need to bake two or more objects into a single shared texture, we can select both objects manually or switch the target mode to Collection, and choose the collection that contains them. Using a collection is often more convenient because a bake queue no longer depends on the current viewport selection. Now enable Merged and click Start. Both objects are baked together and we get the correct result on a single texture. For a merged baking, make sure the UVs of all included objects are packed into the same UV space without unwanted overlaps. Now let's look at the main bake render settings. Here we can choose between GPU compute and CPU rendering. Set the output texture resolution and select a low, medium or high quality preset. These presets control the cycles render sampling settings and directly affect the quality and duration of the bake. In Bake Outputs we can choose the directory where the baked textures will be saved and define a custom naming pattern for the generated files. Tokens can be selected from the drop-down menu and copy-pasted to create your own naming template. At the bottom, Zen BBQ displays a live preview of the output directory and examples of the file names that will be generated. Next is the Bake Maps section. It contains all the map types we previously saw in the shader preview. Each map can be enabled independently and has its own settings, including the image suffix, optional resolution override, and map-specific parameters. For example, let's bake an ambient occlusion map. Enable its checkbox and click Start. Once the bake is complete, select AO in both display modes. Shader mode shows the procedural result, while image mode displays the baked texture. If we select curvature in the shader mode, but see a checker pattern in image mode, it means that the curvature texture has not been baked yet. Enable curvature under Bake Maps and click Start. Now we can compare the procedural curvature preview with the finished texture in the image mode. Zen BBQ also checks for flipped and overlapping UV islands, since both can cause visible problems in baked textures. You may have already noticed the red flipped warning at the top of the panel. Ideally, we should correct these islands using Zen UV. For this demonstration, we can disable the corresponding checks. The warning will no longer appear during the next bake. But keep in mind that this only disables the diagnostics, it does not fix the underlying UV issues. If your object uses multiple materials but the material ID preview shows them in the same color, keep in mind that ID colors are taken viewport display color parameter. You can assign these colors manually or open Tools panel and use Generate Material ID button. Zen BBQ will automatically generate distinct random colors. Let's take a look at a few more tools. Under Normal Map tools you will find Set Weight Normal. which automatically adds a configured weighted normal modifier. It uses face area and angle weighted together with keep sharp to improve shading of hard surface models. The most interesting feature here, however, is explode modifier. When we edit, the separate parts of the model move away from one another. Let's compare the baked result with and without this modifier. Without explode, nearby and intersecting parts can affect one another during baking, producing unwanted blending and smooth transitions between elements that should remain separate. Now let's enable explode, increase the explosion force and raise random max, so the parts move far enough apart and no longer intersect. Then we can start the bake. Once it's complete, disable the explode modifier to restore the assembled model. The parts are no longer blended together in the texture, because each element was baked separately. But what if some parts should remain together while others need to be separated? In edit mode, select the geometry that should be moved during the explosion and assign it to a new vertex group. Let's call it bake. Return to object mode and enter this group's name in the explode modifier's vertex group field. Now, when we enable explode, only the geometry assigned to that group moves away. This gives us precise control over the separation and produces a clean, predictable bake. If your material already contains a normal map texture, it will not be visible in shader mode by default, because the automatic shader Bevels preview override the material output. To display the original normal map, disable shader Bevels preview. But if we want to see both the texture details and the procedural bevels at the same time, we need to add Normals Mixer to the active material. A new Zen BBQ Normals Mixer node now appears in the shader editor. Connect the normal map textures through the normal map node to the mixer normal input, then connect the mixed output to the normal input of the principled BSDF. We can now see both the surface pattern and the procedural bevels. At the value of 1, the bevel normals take priority, keeping the bevels clean and preventing the texture pattern from affecting them. If you prefer to generate or bake bevel shader in Marmoset toolbag, Zen BBQ can export its bevel values through a vertex color mask. First, let's assign 3 different bevel values to separate parts of the model. Then use Node Vertex Color Mask button. Zen BBQ adds a Geometry Nodes modifier that converts the bevel values into a red channel gradient. Take a note of the max global value. In this example it's 50 mm. This represents the widest bevel on the model and will be used to calibrate the result in Marmoset. Now export the model as FBX and import it into Marmoset toolbag. In the render settings, switch render mode to ray tracing, since the procedural bevel shader is not available in the standard raster renderer. We can also adjust the material properties to make the bevel highlights easier to see. In the material surface settings, set the normal type to bevel and select the red channel as the vertex color mask. Set the bevel width to the maximum value we noted in Blender, 50 mm, and increase the sample count for a cleaner result. Marmoset now uses the vertex colors to the scale the bevel widths across the model, reproducing the same variable bevel sizes that we created in Blender. Renders and bake textures are not the only way to display our bevels. Here we have 3 cubes with different values assigned. By clicking Add Bevels, we add pre-configured BBQ Mesh Bevels modifier that reads those values from the edge attributes and reproduces them as actual geometry. As a result, the geometric bevels widths match the procedural bevels we previously created with Zen BBQ. If you don't have time to set up lighting manually, select your object and click Setup Studio. Zen BBQ automatically creates a camera, a 3-point lighting rig, and a target empty for inspecting the model. Switch to the generated camera and use the angle parameter to rotate Studio View around the object. When you're finished, simply click Remove Studio to delete the generated setup. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, and see you next time.